Right now, it has been 69 days since the Newtown massacre, and while D.C.'s been wrangling with hypothetical legislation, the reality on the ground has been anything but hypothetical for the people of Connecticut. Today, Vice President Joe Biden, he paid them a visit, and we were there. And the sequester is fast approaching. What is Congress going to do about it? We'll get the inside scoop here from Congressman Charlie Rangel, who'll tell us what he thinks the prospects of avoiding a shutdown will be. And later, does 5.5 hours sound like enough time to evacuate more than 310,000 people? Well, a new report about Indian Point says that's all it should take in a worst-case scenario, but we're more than a little skeptical. We'll get to the bottom of that. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thanks so much for joining us this Thursday evening, February 21st. We're going to have all those stories, plus we'll take a trip down to Port St. Lucie a little bit later in the program. Now, the national debate on guns, it returned to our region today. Now, just a few miles from Newtown, where we all know the renewed push for gun safety began a little over 2 months ago, Newtown families were joined by lawmakers and by the man heading the Presidential Commission when it comes to guns, none other than Vice President Joe Biden. Our senior political correspondent, Andrew Whitman, he was at today's conference, and he joins us with more. And you had a little bit of everything. You had the lawmakers, both national and local, and you had a lot of emotional testimony from people who this wasn't a story. This was about lives destroyed. And that emotion is important, Rich, because for so many of us watching programs like RFL, the debate over guns and gun safety has become like so many other political issues, often repeated and blending into the background of our national dialogue. But that's not the case in southwestern Connecticut, where the memories of Newtown remain personal and painful.
We ask that our representatives look into their hearts and remember the 26 beautiful lives that we lost and pass meaningful laws that will help prevent this from happening again. We owe it to our children, and I owe it to my daughter, Grace.
Newtown and its 26 victims was never far from the minds of those at the gun conference at Western Connecticut State University Thursday, a school Newtown shooter Adam Lanza briefly attended. Among those focused on Newtown, Vice President Joe Biden.
Having lost a child and a wife in a sudden burst of not gunfire, but a truck, you have a hell of a lot more courage than I had.
But the mood quickly shifted from consolation to calls for action.
People say, and you read, and people write about the political risk and why they're unacceptable to take on. I say it's unacceptable not to take these on.
The conference focused on a range of actions from school safety and mental health to these gun-related laws that could be voted on in Congress by the end of March.
A person can acquire a weapon, he could steal it, he can buy it illegally, but then that person can walk into any store that sells ammunition, and all they have to show is that they're over the age of 21 and they can acquire bullets for that weapon. I think we need to address that issue.
We will never be the same as we were before December 14th. We have changed, and I believe it is now time for our laws to do the same.
There was one viewpoint noticeably absent from today's conference, that of gun supporters like the NRA. They were not invited to the event, which organizers said was focused solely on gun solutions, adding that NRA leaders have already met with the Biden task force and will again as the debate continues. Speaking of the NRA, its president made headlines last night at a forum at Harvard, notable for what the gun group now apparently has in common with the president and vice president: the desire for votes in Congress. David Keene saying, quote, "The president wants votes on these issues. We want votes. There will be votes," and threatening to punish any lawmakers who then support gun control measures. With both sides of the gun debate seemingly confident in victory, I asked a pair of Connecticut lawmakers how and why their side will prevail.
I think information in the hands of the American public will convince people this is what we should be doing. We can make our communities safer.
The truth is our greatest weapon here. 1,900 lives since Newtown, the visual images of those children who were lost, the great educators who sacrificed their lives. These are very compelling arguments in favor of gun safety.
Andrew, you get the sense from the congressman and senator, for example, you talked to, that they think the votes are there so that half, most, if not all of the big four key issues, the database, the background checks, the ammo clip restrictions, and the assault weapons bans, they think it'll pass?
Blumenthal sits on the Senate committee that will actually hear those and pass them along to the full Senate, assuming that they can make it out of committee. He seems confident that not only will they have enough votes to get out of committee, but he thinks they can get through the Senate. And as you heard from the Congresswoman along with the Senator, they think that there's enough room for growth within the American people that if they sell it to the American people, they can get it through the House and get it to the President's desk.
All right, let's bring in our panel on this. We're joined by David Katalf-Moe. He's a partner at Capital Public Strategies and a former advisor to New York Governor George Pataki, and of course Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and as Andrew and I like to say, so much more. All right, you heard the sound, David, from Connecticut today, and you also heard the sound from what the NRA said last night in Harvard. From Republicans' perspective, they got to look at the polls and say, okay, there's one thing in my district, but nationally, the way this thing is going on, every one of those 4 issues I talked about, and for crying out loud on background checks, 92% of the public can't agree on if it's sunny out. Right. And 75% of the NRA believes in universal background checks. Do Republicans think it's more risky to vote down everything or more risky to vote for something and face a primary within their own party?
Well, you know, at the end of the day, it depends on what the package looks like that comes to each of the individual members. But I'll say this, I mean, what matters is exactly what you said, which is what do the polls say, what do the voters say in their individual districts, and that's really what's going to guide most of these members. You have seen instances where the NRA has actually gone after Republicans for being on the wrong side of a gun issue where it was pro-business. There was, I think, a case down south where there were businesses that actually wanted to ban their employees from bringing guns to work, right? And the NRA actually came out against that. So, you know, look, it is possible that we're going to have some internecine fights, but I do think, and to one of Andrew's points in his report, which I thought was very, very good, which is, you know, government's job is to moderate emotion. You know, that actually is part of the job of government, and give people a chance to digest sort of what the response should be to tragic actions like happened in Newtown. And so, you know, while I think it's great that they had this today, and I think it's terrific for the community that they're able to go through this process and for the state of Connecticut to go through it, I don't think that there should be a huge rush. There should be conversation, there should be dialogue, there should be folks like the NRA saying, well, you know, why don't we talk more about mental health issues? Why don't we talk about the real causes of gun violence or the real perpetrators of gun violence, handguns? Let's have a real conversation about what it is that's going on and whether or not that takes 69 days or 120 days. Let's take the time to have it.
Well, how long, Dom? We always said the 5-week rule, that if you go past 5 weeks, the national consciousness tends to fade. Maybe not in this case, but would you have said, if I told you 69 days, when we sat here that night of the Newtown shootings, right? If I told you 69 days from now, Dominic, we don't even have a scheduled vote yet in Congress on this. And the president has spent a lot of political capital on it, so it's not one of these that, well, where's the White House really? They've gone all in on it. He's gone all in. He talked about inauguration, talked about it certainly at State of the Union, and well before that, he talked about it and even choked up the first time we really saw that. Would you have said, Rich, you're asking a lot if you think in less than 3 months we're going to have a vote on this, or would you have thought something had been done by now?
I would say you're asking a lot if you believe in less than 3 months this is going to be pushed for a vote in the Senate and the House. I don't have the answer in terms of the timetable. I think the priority is there, Richard, in terms of the national conscience, and how this is going to play out. You know, we don't exactly know, but I just don't think that, you know, this was going to be pushed and one way or the other. That it was, I would have guessed that we would have played out exactly the way it's playing out right now.
Well, Andrew, do you think it's more probable than not that lawmakers are going to get to vote on individual items? It's not going to be an omnibus bill. It's not going to make it easy so they can say, well, I agree with some of it, but because they have an assault weapons ban in here, I can't sign up for that. They're going to make them vote one after the other, and it seems like the NRA is giving a green light to lawmakers to say, hey, vote. We're clearing your, don't worry, we're clear your conscience, go ahead and go on the record for it. You agree with me, it'll be one after another,
if
right?
If the NRA president wasn't just blowing smoke last night at Harvard, if the group actually means that, then yes, there will be individual votes on each individual element that's in there. The real question then becomes, not what kind of clout the NRA has in highly Republican districts where they could affect a primary, but how much clout do they have in the few remaining swing districts out there, the districts like the one in the Hudson Valley. We've seen switch from party to party a few times in the last few cycles. Can they
for some Democrat in a red state?
Can they influence marginal districts to vote the way that they want to? I'm not sure that they have the same clout that they had 69 days ago.
I think they're actually more powerful in a primary situation. I'll be honest with you.
Certainly, but
in a Republican primary, I think that they absolutely have a lot of clout and could make the difference to somebody who is not pro-NRA enough.
But one thing was different on this one, though, for me, there was that you got, I think, a lot of money willing to be spent to help out a Republican who's going to take a chance. I don't think Bloomberg's just talking here. I really think he and others mean it to say, and we won't make it me, a New York City mayor, doing the ad for you. We'll give you the money. If that's real, how much does that play into it?
It's all about who votes, right? And there's a very small electorate that votes in these primaries, and they tend to be very conservative or very liberal. And it doesn't matter almost how much money you spend. I mean, we saw this in the race, the Steve Salant race, right? Yeah. I mean, he had all the money on his side. He had all the resources on his side. He still loses or does enough.
Because he took a principle stand on gay marriage. But last question I have is, if it goes along party lines here, and this thing doesn't make it through the House, right? And in the end, we don't have any real meaningful reform. Is this going to be a vote Republicans are going to regret here in national elections going forward? You just have the sense that even after Newtown, they're not willing to make any steps. It's just it's a bad mark on the party.
Yeah, but I reject the notion that we can lump them all together. I mean, the reality is that Republicans and...
You don't think the general public will?
Well, I think that the media will, but I don't think that we need to buy into that. I think that Republicans from places that are more suburban and urban are going to probably be more apt to vote for it.
You were right. The media will. All right, we take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to be talking about some of the drastic cuts here. And I know if you say, oh, please, with the sequester stuff, Rich, it'll never happen. I think it's going to happen, first of all, and you better know what's in it. They're right around the corner, and we're going to tell you not only why it's coming fast here, but what it will mean and what is Congress going to do about it, if anything. We'll be joined by Congressman Charlie Rangel to get his perspective. Stay with us.